Thank you, and good evening. It's a real pleasure for me to come back to a Thai Atlanta event after a long time. I'm one of the founding charter members of this organization way back in 1998. I served as president from 2000 to 2001, a long time ago again, and then as chair of our board when we started our board. So it's great, it's really gratifying for me to see that this organization is continuing to make such great contribution to the area of entrepreneurship and has actually expanded entrepreneurship. In my day, it was just technology, as Sanjay knows well. And now we are in support of all entrepreneurs of all kinds. We focus on the young entrepreneurs, we focus on the universities, we focus on entrepreneurs outside of technology, and we focus on entrepreneurs within big corporations. And I'm sure I'm missing one or two areas. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Congratulations to Sid and Amin and Sebastian. Sebastian, I hear a lot of good things about you. Keep up your great work. And Sanket, I hate to break it to you, man, but your role has started now. You know, after this meeting, it's all you. So the theme today is to talk about exit prep, but I wanted to start with just a cautionary word that I feel compelled to share with you guys, which is, to overly focus on the exit, in my mind, is not a very good thing. Life is about the journey, not about the destination, and that's true in entrepreneurship as well. And when we started Manhattan Associates, we actually met in Atlanta. None of us lived in Atlanta at that time. We were five founders at that time. And we all met for the first time. We were meeting some of the other founders for the first time ever, just to have a face-to-face meeting to see if we wanted to get in this business together. And we talked about a lot of things. We stayed in we were just here for a day. I think it was a day trip. We were in a hotel room for the whole day. And we talked about a lot of things. And remember, we were meeting some of us for the first time, even though we had spent enough time on the phone. We talked about how would we enjoy working with each other? Do we connect? Will we respect each other when things get really tough? We talked about the white space in software. What area were we going to focus on? And whether we could add value to our customers. Did we feel like we had a real special sauce to contribute where we could defend our territory against others? And then we spent a lot of time on defining that during that day, and we carved out our space. What we did not talk about was what was the exit going to be? When was the exit going to happen? What did the exit look like? We didn't talk about any of that. So we were very focused on, and at the end of the day, we decided to do it, jump in it together, because we agreed that we will all enjoy working with each other. We felt confident that we had a space that we had defined that we could capture and add value to our customers and add value to our employees, and we got on with it. And then good things followed as a result of that. So with that caveat aside, exits do happen, and I'm going to transition a little bit to my own exit from Manhattan Associates. And I will say that I am still not I don't accept the fact that I'm fully exited from Manhattan even now. So one is, as a founder, you're always connected to the company that you start, but I'm still a director on our board. So we took the company public in 1998. We listed a board of directors at that time. And by the way, you mentioned a lot of things about Tom Noonan. He's actually been a director at Manhattan Associates since 1999. So he's been there a long time. I'm still connected as an independent director, but I did move on from the day-to-day operations in 2002. So as we go along, I'm going to tell you some stories from my experience, and as we get to Q&A, I can share some more. So people talk about an IPO as an exit event for founders and for companies even. We viewed at Manhattan Associates our IPO not as an exit, but as an important step in our journey. There's a little bit of a story about why we decided to do the IPO that's quirky, and I can get into that if you want to in the Q&A. But we have been an independent software company still today. We are a standalone software company as a public company in Atlanta. We started the company in Manhattan Beach, California in 1990, moved it to Atlanta in 95, and we've been here since then. And we have a lot of statistics that are really admirable. We've grown revenues every year since inception. We've been profitable every year since inception. Not a lot of software companies can say that. We have grown profits as well. We have a long list of very successful customers and very successful employees. That's what I'm most proud of in our accomplishment. And in terms of market cap, the day we took our company public in May of 1998, by the way, we were in NASDAQ this year, ringing the bell for our 25th anniversary. That was a fun event, yeah. So the day we took the company public, the valuation of the company was $500 million. I checked today and we're at $13 billion. So I don't tend to focus much on valuations, but I think for this group, I think this was relevant to share. And if you do the CAGR of that over a 25-year period, we have a compounded annual growth rate of 14%. So not bad. Question is, how did we do it? Well, I think we did it through a relentless focus in our employees and our customers and their success. We did it through a relentless focus on defining a niche that we could conquer. We did it by making sure that we have not only created a culture of meritocracy, but have maintained that culture over the growth. Now the company has more than 4,000 people. Things get harder when you get beyond a certain scale, but I'm proud to say that 4 CEOs in and 25 years in, we still very much have that culture of meritocracy. And we did it through employing common sense in our decisions that we make. And one of the things I say is common sense is a misnomer because it's pretty rare. If you just use common sense in making your decisions, you already have a leg up against most people. Speaking of common sense, I'll tell you a little story about from our IPO days. This was the initial process of thinking about taking the company public. As I said, there's a quirky story on that if you're interested. But when we started talking to the bankers, we talked to our first set of bankers that came in and looked at us. And they were really happy, but they gave us good news and they gave us bad news. The good news they gave us was they said, if you look at the historical financials of the company, and the S1 that you file when you take a company public has last 5 years of financials. So they said they have never had the opportunity of publishing an S1 where the 5 years of financials showed robust revenue growth, robust profit growth, and all in the black, no losses. They had never done that. So they were like, this is fantastic. You've got a great history. We can use this to get you a really good valuation. The but part was the bad news. They said, but we want you to change 2 things. They said, we want to take you out as a software company. And in order to do that, things have changed now with cloud and software as a service and all that. But in the olden days, it was all licensed software. So they said, in order to take you out as a software company, which, by the way, gets you much bigger multiples for valuation, we want you to do 2 things. We have seen in your books that you sell hardware. Hardware is not sexy for a software company. So we want you to stop selling hardware today. You need to make that decision now. You need to flush hardware out of your business. The second thing you need to do is we see, and by the way, hardware was about 10 to 15% of our revenue. Not very big, not even strategic at all, but I'll tell you why we did it. Then they said for the services business, which was about 65% of our revenue, they said, we want you to articulate a plan that will reduce that down to below 20% over the next 3 to 5 years. You don't have to flush it right now, but you got to articulate the plan, and then you got to implement on it. If you can do that, we can take you out as a software company. We can get you all these wonderful multiples. And I was talking to Madhav. Where's Madhav? Okay, there you are. So Madhav worked with i2, he said, in his early days. And in those days, they pointed to i2 and Manugistics, and they said, look at these companies. They've got wonderful valuations as software companies. And in order for you to go their path, this is what you got to do. And i2 and Manu were doing most of their services outsourced to the Accentures of the world and others at that time. We did all of our services ourselves, 100% of it. We never did services that did not relate to our software, but all the services that were done for our software, we did ourselves. So we listened to these bankers, and we huddled as founders, and we said, what do we do? These guys are the experts on Wall Street. We're thinking about taking the company public. Maybe we need to listen to these guys. Then we talked about the details of why we do what we do. And for the hardware business, it was not strategic, but it was a component of our business that we did as an accommodation to our customers. Because some of our customers would come to us and say, okay, we're buying the software from you. We're going to rely on you. So we want to make sure that we have a one-stop shop. So we want to buy everything from you, including the hardware. The hardware was either servers, AS400s in those days, or Unix servers. It was printers that would print barcodes. There were scanners that would scan the barcodes. All things that were used to run our software. And they said, we want a one-stop shop. We want to buy it from you. And if they started negotiating pricing on us, we protected our 20% gross margin on hardware. And if they started negotiating hard on that, we'd say, go buy it from anywhere else. We're not interested in selling you hardware. We're only going to do it if you really want us to do it. So we did not want to get rid of that business because it was an accommodation to some of our customers. Not everybody, but some of our customers. The services business was far more important. We started our company, and we ran the company in the first few years as a product development company that was a responsive product development company. So we did not raise VC money and go into a hole to develop software and come back and go, voila, here's the software. That's a model that a lot of companies follow. I'm not knocking that model at all, but we built our product around projects. So we would work with customers, understand their needs, identify based on their needs, separate it into two piles, what's going to go into the base product, what's going to be in the custom layer, and we architected the product really well to handle those two layers well. And then our product kept growing with every project as we started adding more and more to the base system. We were only able to identify how to do that very well by engaging with our customers in the services component. If we didn't engage with them in the services component, in the designing, gap analysis, and all that up front, and in the implementation after the fact, we would never know their business as well as we got to know it. And then we became experts in those businesses. So services business was the heartbeat of our business. So we went back to the bankers and said, okay, we've listened to you guys. We can't get rid of either of these things. So we don't want the high multiples that you're promising for software companies. Give us whatever multiple you can give us. Take us out as a solution company. And the first set of bankers said, we're not interested. They walked away. It cost us a little bit more self-reflection, but we stayed true to our word. We found a different set of bankers, and we took the company public as a solution company. And then after a few years, the menus and I too started struggling, and people started liking our business model much better. We had predictability of revenues, and the whole model about building the product around projects was working well. We don't do that anymore. I mean, now we are at a scale where we have much more robust R&D processes, and we build the products with a defined R&D process. We invest, I think, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, let me do some quick math here, about $80–90 million in R&D a year. I think in our history, we have just crossed over $1 billion of investment in R&D. So R&D is the innovation is the engine of our company, and that is important to us. And we have codified that more and more, but when we started, it was really important for us to engage with our customers and build our product around projects. So there's that little story about common sense. You know, we use common sense to say this is what makes sense for us, and we're not going to do something artificial to get a high valuation. So as you're thinking about exits and valuations and all that, keep in mind that valuation is an important component, but it's not the be-all and end-all, unless you're just selling it and washing your hands off and going and doing something else. But for us, this was just important step in the process. Now let me switch to kind of my own exit from the business. So I exited the business 4 years after our IPO in 2002. And like I said, again, I'm still connected as a director, but I'm not there day to day. And I did that after a lot of soul searching. My other 3 founding partners had left the company by then. We had grown to be more than 2,000 people at that time. We had started it as 5 people. And I felt like I was too far removed from the action. So I was not writing code anymore. I was not interacting much with customers in terms of gap analysis and product definition. I was doing most of the back-end work on that, talking to our teams and growing our teams. And my calendar was full of meetings because we were on Outlook, and every employee in the company could see my calendar, and they could block time on my calendar for whatever they wanted to talk to me about. So all I was doing was talking to people all day long. And most of the meetings I was in was to talk about other meetings, future meetings. And that was not an idea of fun for me. Now, again, I'm not knocking that. There are some people that, for them, the hands-on work is to work with people. For me, the hands-on work was get my hands dirty and write some code. So I wasn't doing that, so I decided to leave the company. After the IPO, I didn't leave because I was still interested in all this stuff. And we also had a big transition year in '99, the year after our IPO. '99 was a tough year for us. It was actually the first tough year for us. We missed earnings guidelines 1 quarter. We had declining profits 2 quarters. And we'd never had any of those kinds of things before. And we were also doing a technology transition from AS400 to open systems. So there was a lot going on in the business that was pretty challenging. And after a lot of self-reflection, we decided to bring in some outside management. We brought in the first outside CEO. I handed over the CTO role that I had to an outside hire, and we made those transitions. The reason I stayed for 4 years in the business is because the new CEO who came in relied on me for knowledge of the business, for knowledge of the customers. He would take me to Wall Street meetings and stuff to talk about project implementations and so on. So we had a really good relationship, and we used to joke that in the boardroom, I'm his boss, but outside the boardroom, he was my boss because he was CEO and I was in the management team. So we had a good relationship. We built a good relationship pretty quickly, and I enjoyed working with him, so I stayed for 4 years. And after that, I left for the reasons I told you. The first CEO, Alan DeBerry, and I could complete each other's sentences, and we were very much on the same page at all times, so that was fun to work with him. Then once I left, one of the other things that I learned about, in some ways the hard way, that I learned about the transition was our third CEO who came in, Pete Sinisgalli. He came in as a CEO when I was just a board member. I was no longer part of the management team in the company. And how he viewed me was fundamentally different than how the previous 2 CEOs had viewed me. Because I was working day in and day out with them, I was part of their team, and we all got along really well. But Pete viewed me as a threat, essentially. Because, I'm not saying bad things about Pete. I understand where he was coming from after the fact. But he viewed me as a threat because here's the founder that's sitting on the board, that's my boss. He's connected to everybody in the company. Any complaint that anybody has in the company, they call Deepak, and Deepak calls me about it. And it made it hard for him to run his day-to-day operations. Now, I would say in hindsight, there were 2 lessons learned. I think Pete probably took things a little too defensively because he didn't know me, because I'm not a meddler and things like that. He assumed the worst. And I also treated him like I treated the other 2 CEOs, where I was completely open with him without any filter, where I had to learn how to use those filters appropriately. So that was another kind of important lesson learned for me on transitioning from the role of being in the management team of a company to being just on the board of the company and not being in the management team in the day-to-day operations. Let's see, what else do I want to share? We have a little bit of time? Okay, so then when I decided to finally leave the company, I did a lot of soul searching, and I said, okay, what am I going to do next? And I decided quickly that I'm not a serial entrepreneur, despite what the title here says. That's not because I didn't feel like I would be successful in my next venture. I had 100% confidence that I could be, but I also knew what it took. And it was 80 hours a week for 15 years, and I didn't want to continue doing that. So frankly, that's the reason I decided serial entrepreneurship is not for me. Angel investment and VC was also not for me, because at that time, after kind of self-diagnosing myself quite a bit, I decided that I'm not a tinkerer. I do one thing and I do 120% in it, and I can't do 5 different things of advising 5 different companies without being fully invested in it. So I decided not to do that. And I'm a lifelong learner. I decided that, I want to learn, I want to get my hands dirty, so what do I do? So I used to watch this Cosmos series growing up in India. We used to have TV channel with, I think, 2 or 3 channels at that time, black and white TVs, but on Sundays, they used to play the Cosmos series from Carl Sagan, and he would talk about his wonders, and he's just incredible in terms of how he communicated astronomy and his wonders to the people with a sense of humility and with a sense of awe. And that sunk in, and I was always curious about the possibility of life outside of Earth. And I knew that I enjoyed physics and math as my favorite subjects, and so I decided that I wanted to jump in both feet and try to do a PhD in astronomy. So I called Georgia Tech, where we hired a lot of people from at Manhattan Associates. We had good relationships with them. They said, well, if you want a PhD in astronomy, you got to go to Georgia State down the road. So I called Georgia State, and then I got enrolled in that program. I took 7 years to complete my PhD, and I have continued to stay in Georgia State, and currently I'm a professor of practice doing part-time teaching there, teaching intro to physics classes that for future doctors and future PTs and future exercise science majors, or teaching intro to astrophysics for physics majors. And I enjoy doing that. The other thing that we did at that time as a family, my wife and I, we sat down and said, okay, what are the really important things for us? And even before I left Manhattan Associates, we said one of the key things for us was, Sid mentioned this, and he and his family are very invested in this as well, the philanthropy aspect. We felt like we had gained a lot from society, and we wanted to do our part to help improve society. So we created a family foundation in 2001, put some seed funding into it, and over the years we have continued to grow it, and that is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our lives. Along with giving money to organizations we support, we don't believe in just giving the money and not worrying about what they do with it, so we volunteer our time with it. Priya, my wife, volunteers at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I volunteered at several nonprofits by serving on their boards. These days, I'm on 3 nonprofit boards in addition to Manhattan Associates. I'm on Zoo Atlanta board. This is my second stint there. Animal conservation is one of the key pillars of our family foundation. The other one is children's health, and the third one is education. I am on Atlanta Police Foundation board, and the third board I'm on is the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, which operates through something called the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard University, which the CFA, Center for Astrophysics, is a joint venture between Harvard and Smithsonian. And I'm on that board, and I currently chair that. These nonprofit boards, by the way, take a lot of time. They are quite rewarding when you get to a certain point. Sanjoy's nodding. She's involved in her own things, including Leadership Atlanta now. So they're very rewarding when you're working with people that have similar goals and objectives, but they are very time-consuming. But it's been a fun journey to do that as well. What else? I mean, I can talk about more stuff, but let's get the panel assembled, and we'll continue. Yeah, okay, just questions up front. Okay. As we what?
Hey, what factors were taken into consideration when determining the multiple for Manhattan, and what factors are typically taken into consideration for a multiple in the context of a SaaS company?
So Sid may have more to say about this than I do in terms of SaaS company multiples and so on, but I will give you some broad factors. So at Manhattan Associates, I already told you, we did not care about what multiple we got. We said for us to do an IPO was a step in the journey, and so we said whatever valuation ends up being, it ends up being. We are the company we are. Take us out as we are. We don't want software company multiples that they promised were much higher. And these days, for a public company, EBITDA is what's looked at if you are profitable. If you're not profitable, then there are other metrics, there are revenue multiples and so on. It also depends on if you're categorized as a value company or a growth company. We started off, I think, as a value company. Then we had a period of time when we were called a GARP company, growth at a reasonable price, which is the blend between value and growth. And there are times when we have been viewed purely as a growth company. So we've gone through various valuation models as a public company, and we tend not to focus too much on that, frankly. We did not contest it. I mean, with a public market, you don't contest it. It's a public stock price. There was no contesting. If we had done a VC deal, then there might have been a little more negotiation. But I'll give you another tangential story to this, which is, when we were four founders sitting around and talking about how much of the company each of us should own, right? So that's a tough discussion that a lot of people need to have. And sometimes I say, some of these tough discussions, you got to set aside the whatever few hours it takes to have that discussion and go at it. But once you're done, you got to be at peace with it. You cannot keep reflecting back on that and saying, I should have gotten more. I can't tell you the number of times people came up to me and told me that I did not get my fair share of the ownership of the company. It didn't bother me one bit. Because to me, I said, and Alan said this, and I borrowed his quote, which was, I'd rather have a smaller slice of a growing pie than have all of nothing. So I knew that I couldn't do it on my own. I needed these other guys there. We had the hard negotiations, and we had agreed to what we had agreed to. I was not going to revisit that. And never have I regretted that. So one of the principles I live life by is be a bargain in life, give more than you expect in return. And that has served me well because it gives me peace of mind. I'm not always calculating and always thinking of what I should get and what I should have gotten. If you go into a situation saying, I'm ready to give more than I get back, then you're satisfied and you're happy. So that's right. But when it comes to SaaS valuation, I'm sure Sid will have more to say about it later. Yeah.
In a teaching profession as a university professor, and I really admire you for doing what you have doing. But what made you choose teaching versus being a serial entrepreneur and start another one?
Yeah, I already told you why I didn't become a serial entrepreneur, because I knew what effort was involved in that, and I wasn't willing to do that for the next 10 years of my life. But teaching, Manhattan Associates, we were really scaling the business pretty fast ever since our inception. We were turning away business. Our constraint for growth, even till today, I would say, is not can we sell more, it's can we deliver more. So we've always been constrained by the number of people and recruiting the people and getting them trained and getting them ready to go. So in that sense, we were always hiring people, and we hired a lot of people from Georgia Tech, and undergraduates was our favorite group of hires. And so we'd had to train them on our software. So we would have on Saturdays classroom sessions, and we'll bring pizzas for lunch, and we used to work all Saturdays, and the new employees would come in and learn about the product and all that. And I used to spend a lot of time teaching, and a lot of people came up to me and said, "You're really good at explaining complex things in a simple way." So I've always enjoyed doing that, and that's why when I went to teaching, I had gotten an MBA from Georgia State earlier, and they asked me to teach in the business school. They asked me to teach international business, other business, entrepreneurship, and all this stuff. And I turned all that down, and I said, I want to teach something that's really hard to explain. So physics sounded like something that I wanted to do. And astrophysics is part of my interest, so that's the path I went there. I do want to mention one more thing, which I haven't mentioned that's a key part of my life, is running. So, and I'll give you, to give you context of that, and one thing, this is a little bit of a cautionary tale, which is, when I left Manhattan Associates, we were working 80 hours a week for 15 years. And so my biggest concern was, will I have too much free time? Will I not have enough to do? And whenever you have a concern, what do you tend to do? You tend to overcompensate. So I've always taken on more than I can chew, and to this day, I'm struggling with that. So one of the things I'll leave you with is, if you're planning an exit and all that, be more conscious about having free time and being okay with it. I was not, and I'm still learning to say no, and still learning to have be comfortable with free time. I struggle with it. If I got free time for a period of time, I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm happy working all the time. Maybe that's how I'm wired. Maybe those 15 years wired me that way, whatever it is. But one of my other things is, when I did my MBA, they said there are 3 kinds of people. You've got NACH, need for achievement. You got NAF, need for affiliation, and POW, need for power. So they said all people can be divided into these 3 things. Now, some people have different traits or different things, but the main thing that drives us is either power, a lot of politicians would belong in that category, affiliation, a lot of people that need to feel their energy come from others, or need for achievement. And I'm off the charts on the need for achievement, so I've got this issue of I've always need to keep doing something. So I started running, I started doing some triathlons, I started running, and then I started setting goals for running. And this Sunday, 3-4 days from now, I will be in Detroit running my half marathon in the 50th state of the country. So it's been a fun journey. So
Awesome. Round of applause for Deepak. And now we're going to transition to the panel. Awesome, guys.